Great to be here.
How's it going?
Emile. Good, good. How is everyone?
Great now.
Great.
At home.
And even better now. Yeah.
The main thing, the two main things bringing us all together, the quarantine and our love of Ethereum. What can be better?
Yeah, and it's the closest we can get now to like an actual, drink or meeting or event, as we all love them so much. So no, thank you so much for being part of ETHTurin and being able to share some also of your amazing experience, because you've been in the space in many different roles, and I'll definitely let you introduce yourself better. But you've gone from different projects to, like, I would call you the community queen, like, really, if that was just...
Man, I remember the first time that I met Simona manning the Bounties network booth alone.
We never had a booth. We never had a booth. The main thing...
You.
It was me. It was like the portable Bounties network.
And it also was like, your profile on you were involved in Bounties network, with like blockchain for social impact with consensus as well, and now Pepo community app. So these are all like things that we believe in, and
I was just so excited that there was this talented, outgoing girl. Yeah, in this sausage fest that crypto had been for so long, right? It's just like somebody who got it that was female. I was like, oh, cool, man. So anyway, it was great meeting your sunny face years ago and watching your trajectory in the space and everything that you're doing. It's great working with you. Really looking forward to this talk, man. What's up, Simone?
Thank you, guys. This is all very very sweet and very humbling, and I think the main driver in everything that I've ever done has been focused on adoption. How can we enable the access of everyone to what we're building, and what we're all doing here, and hopefully translating a lot of the very complex things that are being built into stories and into language that is relatable, that everybody can understand. So I kind of want to take this opportunity, and obviously the title of my talk is around SDGs. And I want to kind of take you through some of those projects that I've worked on and how they've related to some of the SDGs, but at the end of the day, the main focus being this impact piece. And it isn't necessarily social or environmental impact, it's just impact in real life and what that means. And so for me, it's very much how you affect change and how you empower people. And it's this transition from power to empowerment, which has very, very different dynamics. The power piece is very much a selfish, let's say, concept, whereas empowering is very much about other people, is very much about a distributive way of looking at things and potentially redesigning current models. So this is a very, very broad definition, but at the end of the day, it is all about that strong effect on someone or something. And we are at this point in time where we have so many parts of the technology to create these things that will have a strong effect on someone or something, and potentially generate this redesign of economic models, of the flow of money, of the access to resources that we haven't had for a very long time. We're talking decades and decades and decades. And this is a very important moment in time as far as I'm concerned. And so we all know the stats. If we go look at all of the inequalities, if we go and look at the fact that still economic models and economic courses teach that inequality is somehow a necessary part of the economy. It is not. It's very much a design flaw. And it's because we have perpetuated certain ideas in economics courses and in policy making and in decisions and in politics that were created in the 19th century or early 20th century, and we really need to re-examine those, because a lot of them, particularly this one with the inequality, is a necessary part, and at some point the GDP will somehow restore the balance, is just not true. And so this is the time for redesign. And so what does that redesign mean? It's very much about this opportunity and choice. As far as I'm concerned, again, this is the main thing that blockchain brings to the table. It's the main thing that Ethereum brings to the table. It enables opportunity and choice where there are none, or certainly very limited. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the unbanked or it's people in developing countries. This is about anybody who right now is in a situation where things could be better, or they're, they should be thriving versus being trapped in a rat race or a debt-driven prison. And so the key ingredients for this is broadening the access. Again, we're talking, censorship. We're talking moving away from all of that, mobilizing people within their communities. This again comes back to the empowerment piece. I think the empowerment and giving individuals and communities the tools through which they can self-organize and they can transact value within their own communities, within their own spaces, is very, very important. And then create the alternatives to deliver income and value, again, falling into that empowerment piece. And so making an impact, how have we seen that impact being made? And how I've certainly looked at all the different initiatives that I've worked on have been around these three main points. So the transparent funding is a big piece when we talk about impact. And this, of course, the example that I'm going to give, which a lot of you are familiar with, is around social and environmental impact. This transparency of fund flows is very, very important. One of the key things that we must remember is, for instance, corporate social responsibility is a trillion dollar industry, let's say, or vertical. All of those funds are transacted in complete darkness. You have no idea how they flow. You have no idea what they're being spent on. You have no idea whether they actually achieve the goals that they claim to want to support. And so the adding the smart contract layer has that advantage of enabling broader and cheaper fund dispersal mechanisms. So if we think, and this was something that was discussed in a Andreessen Horowitz talk back in, I think it was ETH Berlin 2018, or maybe it was, I can't remember. But anyway, it was brought up that it is cheaper to fly a bag of money from Europe to the States than it is to actually transfer those funds via the banking system. It's quicker if we're talking, it's true. If we're taking a London to New York flight, you can do it in 6 hours. So me checking in a bag of money and flying it to New York, let's say I bought it early enough that I got it for, I don't know, $300 or something. It's infinitely cheaper and quicker than transferring it bank account to bank account. So in the realm of impact and in the realm of transacting funds and moving funds around, this becomes a key aspect, because again, the cost, but not just the cost. Let us remember how many countries are not part of the SWIFT network. If you're not part of the SWIFT network, you cannot do international bank transfers with all the fees and the time and all of that jazz. So for a lot of people, that's not even an option. and it's a crap option as it is. So this whole crypto flow really does redesign things and can have the potential of making things a lot better. I was actually talking to somebody from the World Food Program last year, and they said that in some cases, sometimes they have to tape money onto somebody to get them across a border. So even go into how dangerous that is, how insane that is, the fact that that is still happening in 2020 and where we are now. So the transparent funding is definitely a key piece. New means of income. So one of the things with new means of income right now, we have everything is very much drawn up into pretty black and white situations of you either have a job and you get paid, or you don't have a job and you don't get paid, and things are really crap. So being able to provide viable alternatives to the traditional jobs, and some of them that are phasing out, or some of them that are, not necessarily sustainable anymore, or that are evolving, again, begins to be a very, very interesting piece. And this, for me, of course, it stems from the work that I did with the Bounties Network. And co-founding Bounties Network was one of those things where I really saw it as a very, very flexible and very, very easily adoptable tool to provide this. And so being able to get resources or access to resources by completing certain projects, by completing certain tasks, and I'm going to show you what that means IRL, is, again, a pretty good game-changing opportunity. And then lasting change. This is the thing where we right now have, and again, it goes back to how economics has, kind of hypnotized us into this chase growth, which means you always think short term. If you're switching to a long-term thought pattern where you're talking about thriving, you're not talking about this growth at all cost, growth until we're blue in the face, regardless of what that means, it becomes something that you are looking at in terms of lasting change and creating these frameworks to be able to involve individuals, involve communities into the running of things and distributing the wealth rather than distributing income becomes a shift in the way things are done and the way people benefit from the system rather than having to almost live with this, oh, I drew the short straw and I was born or live in a country that doesn't have the same socioeconomical opportunities that others do. So hopefully that brings lasting change. And again, because we're talking about Impact IRL, for everybody who doesn't know about this project, we created the Bounties for the Oceans initially on World Ocean Day in 2018. The idea with it was to move the bounties concept and the mechanism of dispersing funds across other verticals rather than just the very, very developer, very open source focus that had been the kind of the primary use case for bounties when we created the standard bounties protocol. And so by expanding and going broad with bounties, we created this and wanted to see, okay, could this be a mechanism that helps redesign this model for social and environmental impact? So we launched this. We launched it in partnership with MakerDAO at the time. And the task was very simple. Submit verifiable proof that you have performed a cleanup, and we will reward you with some DAI. So rather than us asking individuals for money and then promising we're going to do whatever it is that we're going to do, we flipped it and said, hey, if you can prove that you've done this, you should get rewarded for your time and your contribution. And we waited to see what would happen. And so what happened was we started getting submissions from a lot of people and a lot of different regions. So different geographies. So we started getting submissions from across the US, from Europe, from Tasmania, from Australia. It was very, very broad. And the very interesting piece was that most of these people were not part of the crypto scene. They were not part of the ecosystem already, but they were curious about it. So they knew or they saw something about crypto or about blockchain that was interesting, and this was a way for them. This was an in. Earning crypto for doing something that we're passionate about already, I'm assuming, and being able to establish this kind of mechanism of earning for an activity, and very simply and very easily being able to earn without my needing to know, their bank accounts or their PayPals or their Venmos or heaven knows what else. And so we were very, inspired by this, and we thought, okay, this is great. And because we were a little bit masochistic, we've always been that way, and always wanted to get things in front of real users who would tell us, okay, this doesn't make sense, this is stupid, this is shit, why are you using this? We decided to create this pilot in the Philippines in 2018, at the very end, in December, because we wanted to see, okay, it's great that we have all of these individual contributions, but what would this look like within a community? And the community was a community of fishermen in that location. So they were in Manila Bay, and this particular La Papachea, as an acronym of that area that you see in the image, this was an area, a beach, and an area around Manila Bay. And again, most of the people there were fishermen. Now, of course, what is happening is the Philippines are the third most polluted country in the world. And what you see in this image with the trash, it's not far off what was happening on that beach. And what is happening because of that is obviously the fish populations are dwindling. So these guys who have been fishermen for generations go out, catch nothing. How are they supposed to support themselves? And what we thought was, okay, well, what if we work with them, onboard all of these guys onto a wallet, reward them for this cleanup that we're going to do across these 2 days, and see what happens. And so what happened, and because mentioning the kind of SDGs, these are just some that it would kind of potentially address, right? Particularly the sustainable communities, particularly climate action, the decent work and economic growth, and potentially education. Because again, if you are able to equip communities and individuals with the tools needed, you can then really expand the scope of what you're doing and what the different projects and initiatives and flows you can establish. And so I don't know if this will play, but I'm happy to share this afterwards. We actually filmed a documentary whilst we were there, just to show and chat about some of the issues, some of the blockers, some of the the hoops that we and everybody who participated had to go through. Again, I don't know if it will play, but we'll try, and you can tell me.
Do I remember correctly that Griff was involved with this as well?
Who's that?
Griff Green?
No.
He didn't have anything to do. Okay, that
was did not. So
different cleanup project that he did.
Yeah. So this we did in partnership with Blockchain for Social Impact, and then Consensus supported us with some of the cash. But a really interesting piece about this, coming back to the transparent funding, is that after we put some money in, and obviously Blockchain for Social Impact put some money in, and I'm talking, a couple of thousand, to fund the bounty that these guys were fulfilling, we then started getting individual contributions to the point where people were contributing straight into the bounty, a $5 worth of ETH, a $20 worth of ETH. I had a guy contact me on LinkedIn saying, I just finished a technical interview and I got paid $300 equivalent in DAI. Can I contribute it all to the bounty? And of course, we were doing it in ETH at the time because we had a partnership with an organization on the ground called coins.ph, where the participants could exchange the ETH into Filipino peso. And I'm going to cover this in a second. And they didn't have ERC20 support at the time. So let me know if you can hear this and see it.
We can see it, but not hear it, but the undertitles are there.
Okay. So it's fine. I'm going to share a link in Discord about it to the trailer and then also the full documentary if you want to watch it. But the idea here was that we had the rewards in ETH, but it was very, very important to make sure that they were convertible in pesos, in Filipino peso, because we didn't want to be in that situation where we would turn up, have them do all of this thing, give them some magic internet money that they had no way of offboarding. And so we partnered with these guys, coins.ph, who had a network in the Philippines that enabled people to pay for things in different shops and so on. And in their wallet, it's almost like a digital wallet. And in there, they could exchange the ETH into peso straight into in the coins.ph app, which was great. And it was one of the reasons why we chose the Philippines as well, because they were already there and we knew that it was an important piece of the puzzle. And so because of this flow and because of these contributions that I mentioned earlier, you are essentially re-engineering the flow of money. You are no longer depending on a single organization to decide where the funds go, who gets paid. Is there a 20% that went to executives? Is there a 5% that went wherever? All of the money from the bounty that we set up for the Philippines went to the payouts. And people could see the submissions, they could see these verifiable proofs, which, by the way, were a little bit rustic. I think there's definitely a lot of work to still be done in that area involving AI and location and geolocation, but it was essentially a photo with the person, with the trash, with a date stamp, and the location, and then they would submit to the bounty. When we did this pilot in the Philippines, we obviously were there, so we're able to verify a lot easier. But what you're again saying is, could this model that is very lightweight and very efficient, because we were there for 2 days and then we left, but what happened was some of the people who were there on the 2 days continued fulfilling that bounty. We kept that bounty up for 6 months until we ran out of cash after this event. And some of those people continued to do regular cleanups because now they had the tools, they knew how it worked, they knew how to exchange the ETH into peso. Boom. So you are potentially looking at this long-term behavior shift that could involve the citizens, involve the individuals and the communities, and you are able to provide these new opportunities, provide these new choices for them. So in terms of environmental impact, it wasn't that huge, but we did this across 2 days, and actually we had put on the schedule from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. But the truth of it was that by 10:30 a.m., because there was so little shelter on this strip of beach, we had to stop at 10:30 because it got so hot. And so across the 2 days, we only cleaned for 2.5 hours per day. So we're talking 3.3 tons of trash gathered in 5 hours. So 2.5 hours one day, 2.5 another. And another big piece here is we also partnered with a recycling company on the ground to help us not only segregate the trash, but also recycle it. And you see more in the documentary how that worked. And again, this was a very, very important piece, because we didn't want to have that situation where you would have a cleanup and then what are we going to do with all of these 3 tons of trash? They're just going to end up back on the beach.
Can I interrupt you with a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So this is the let's say user side or the earner side of it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see this actually getting financed when it's not a grant structure finance? Okay, use the bounties for people to claim their payment for doing work. But where should the funding come from? Would that be state funding, or would that be an infrastructure replacement? That this is how state funding could result in cleaning up the environment?
So the very short answer is any of those things, because as I mentioned with this model, we had, if you think about it, we had institutional funding, so from companies. We had individuals funding it, but also I mentioned earlier the corporate social responsibility money. Now, if you were to establish this type of model, and again, there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that it's better, that it's quicker and whatnot. But as a model, you could apply it to several different initiatives, several different outcomes, and flow that money through something like this.
It's less of a technical question than it is a social one, though, right?
Yep. Absolutely. And this is a thing where actually this was a conversation that I had started with the authorities in the Bahamas at the end of last year, where they wanted to educate their citizens to recycle. So as a thing in the Bahamas, recycling is not a thing. Everybody just, there's a massive dump and everything goes there. And what they were thinking about is, okay, they were changing their, the people they were working with for trash disposal, and they wanted to change the model as well. So one of the conversations that we were having is, can we educate people to start recycling by giving them small incentives, and then periodically give them a slightly bigger incentive for their community? And so what you're achieving there is you're achieving the transparency of funds, you're achieving potentially teaching people how to change their behavior, so a completely new way of doing things, and you are involving the individuals and the communities in the running of the system. And
I guess what I was asking was less so of the education question about a specific initiative, which in this case could be environmental, in another case could be health related or whatever. I was saying education about this type of bounty process being educated. Yeah. So
what I was just saying with the authorities in the Bahamas, it would be the authorities in the Bahamas who would be doing this, right? They would employ this model or this tool to be able to achieve something that they wanted to achieve by teaching people by doing and rewarding them for doing something.
Okay,
and then,
so let me ask you an additional question, okay? Because
sure.
you're
and then just so I covered the funding piece, if you think they could use that whatever it is that they had funds allocated for trash disposal, they could use some of that money to support an initiative like this.
Okay, so the next question for me is then, what role or what advantage does blockchain authentication and immutable ledger so verification play in the role of this? Is it necessary, or couldn't this be done with a fiat process as well? What is the USP for this being done with tokenization?
So I think the main USP is that you would then enable people to tap into more opportunity once they know, once they're set up with a wallet, let's say, and once they know the flow. So for instance, the guys who participated in this Philippines cleanup then went on to fulfill other bounties that had nothing to do with trash. They did an art one, some of them that we had up. They did a research one where we were asking, wanted to get a sense of where people were who were fulfilling some of the bounties. So it again, from this perspective, it broadens the horizon for opportunity. This is what it, without the need for, again, having a bank account or being able to get transfers from I don't know what bank, or having all sorts of, let's say, Web2 or traditional payment methods in place, because a lot of these guys just didn't. Like, a lot of them didn't have bank accounts. So from that perspective of access to a resource, that's the biggest piece. So the immutable and all of that, it's the dispersal of funds, the super quick dispersal of funds, and being able to have a transparent flow that would help with getting more funds in, let's say, because you could say, okay, well, for, again, taking the Bahamas as an example, that government could see where the money is going and could trace it and say, okay, and maybe we could give them some data based on that, where otherwise it would just be, well, I'm going to pay an institution and they're going to take care of all of that.
Did you have discussions with other governments?
No. So the Bahamas was an interesting one, because I guess they're small enough that they would be game for something like this. But it's certainly something that is easily replicable. I think one of the main pieces is to do everything in a pilot situation first, with forward thinking enough, or risk, let's say, non-risk adverse enough countries to be able to stomach something like this, because for a lot of people it is something that's just way into the future, which it absolutely is. But I think you need these pilots in order to not only test out whether it works or not, but also inspire people and show people what is possible, because that's been one of the key issues that I have had in my career so far, is getting people to realize what is possible. And going to more, let's say, formal events with people not of the Web3 space, they still very much look at blockchain as a database, a slightly better database than the one that they use now, when the possibilities are so much greater. But you need to show versus tell. We know this from education. 60% of all information we digest is visual. Stories, that is how people can relate and can have an emotional response to a concept. Without,
I mean, and even to understand it,
absolutely.
I think there's like, there's just concept that we even struggle sometimes with, and
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, the whole Bahamas conversation came because of this. You know?
No, I mean, and it's true that you need also like to have like the government, like the right people for tests, right? Like, who are not, as you said, like too risk averse, like not too large countries. I mean, we've seen it also with COVID-19 and Taiwan, for example. Like, they have developed solutions. I mean, in this case, like, there was no choice, like they had to implement it like right away. But everything was also an experiment, and so these are the type of sort of silver lining, I would say, of COVID-19 as well. Like, these sort of things like need to be shown right away. And going back to what you said, Simona, on because it also not only on the government, but it also depends on how you manage to change ETH into fiat currency. And
Yes.
you quickly mentioned the partner that was based in the Philippines, but I'm wondering how that is replicable, and because it's a big piece of the puzzle, and a lot of even like DAOs are amazing ways to fund projects, but currently they limit or govern these projects, but they're also limiting themselves to ETH holders.
So the piece with onboarding and offboarding is clearly one of the biggest pieces of the conversation. And again, it's very, very important to always look at partnerships and always look at the solutions before you start something. Again, this is very much about a re-engineering of the model, but in a very sustainable and responsible way, which is again one of the reasons why we researched what the levels of pay were in the Philippines for that particular area for those particular people before we went. We didn't want to be in a situation where we turned up with hundreds of dollars and completely destabilize a certain balance that was there. You have to do all of these things very, very mindfully. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you have those models in place, or certainly you move towards making sure that those models are in place, because otherwise nobody else is going to come and use this stuff. It's going to be us, and it's going to be us again, and it's going to be more like us tomorrow. The idea is, if you are really
we're talking to each other.
right. And this is exactly something that I am very, very wary of, and this is why I focus so much of my time on education, on creating examples, pilots, models for continuing that action and making sure that you have the examples to showcase what can be done, because otherwise you do not have that level of understanding from the outside. And so let me just back a little bit to okay. So another, and I wanted to give you another example again, because we're talking about these offboarding situations, is actually an example that's with Pepo this time, which is the project that I work with now. It's this very, very simple example, and I have used it a lot because, again, it gives you that understanding that it isn't just one project that has this ability. It is actually the way you use it that can be incredibly powerful. So Brandon is a homeless guy who lives in Phoenix, Arizona. He became part of the Bounties Network community last year, and he started, he was going to the library, public library, and started researching or looking into crypto. And then he started completing bounties. One of the bounties that he completed was one of these trash cleanups. And actually, he had like these videos that he was submitting of him dragging out like shopping carts out of this river that runs through Phoenix. Anyway, he did an art one. That image is from an art bounty that he did that we had up with Super Rare. And anyway, at some point, he kind of stopped fulfilling bounties. So I messaged him and said, look, is everything okay? Are you okay? Do you need any help with anything? And he just mentioned, yeah, my laptop that I had, that somebody had given him, like a straggly old thing, had finally died a death. And so this was my third video that I had made on Pepo, and said, do I know anybody in Phoenix, Arizona who maybe has a laptop? Nobody was from Phoenix, but within 48 hours, so I posted this on Friday night, by Sunday, I had over $250 in Pepo coins that people had sent me, had liked on the video. So again, Pepo, the way it works is the likes are actually money. So it's a layer 2 app that essentially rewards people for their content, and people, instead of just liking, do microtransactions. So 48 hours, $250 that I gathered from people, and then within the app you have a store, and I was able to exchange the Pepo tokens into an Amazon voucher straight in the app. Again, this offboarding, very, very important. And so I changed it into an Amazon voucher, sent him the code. He, I don't know, spent maybe another day choosing a laptop, got it delivered at an Amazon pickup point in Phoenix, Arizona, and then the local library lets him store it overnight so it doesn't get stolen or damaged. Again, it's, if you think what I would have needed to do, I mean, obviously I could have just forked out $250, got him an Amazon voucher and sent him the code. But the crowdsourcing, the ability to gather money from people all over the world, regardless of whether they have Venmo or PayPal or accounts or non-accounts or whatever, is huge. The fact that this whole operation happened within this 48-hour period, with my just having to put this video out, it was a 30-second video that I put up, and be able to achieve this in such a short space of time is important. And it can be completely game changing, because again, you offer opportunity and choice, and you're enabling these flows of funds to circulate in a much better way than they do right now, and in a much more supportive way than they do right now. And this is, again, it's a very interesting and very powerful case, but you could apply it to any other dynamic of exchanging value. You could apply it to communities supporting each other. You could apply it to individuals within that community supporting each other. So there's a lot of different dynamics that this enables. And again, it isn't just one tool. You can actually have this as a widespread thing. It's just that we need to start putting these out there for real people to use. And the reason why I mentioned this is actually the Blockchain for Social Impact Incubator just finished, and we had the winners announced on Earth Day on Wednesday. And these are some of the projects that are being built. So Wolfpack is all about homelessness and solving this terrible problem through a better flow of funds, through a better way of retraining people or getting them back or rehabilitated or making their way back into society. ETHTurin is about carbon and how we offset it, even with the smart contracts and all the CO2 that whole situation brings into play. And it's something that I get asked all the time, particularly when I'm doing all of these environmental things. They're like, yes, but Ethereum consumes X amount of electricity. How do you justify that? Here, this could be a very, very good option. And these guys, if you follow them on Twitter, I think they have the same handle. You can see their progress, and they're doing some great things. Solidarity Card, again, is all about this idea of how we can move away from the cash and how we can, again, enable better flows of money. And then KeysDAO was about these neighborhoods and how they can share tools and skills and help each other out in a much more connected way, in a much more value driven way. So
can I ask you?
yeah.
Sorry, I haven't. I saw like this name. I haven't really had time to look through them. But do you believe that these projects like kind of solve the bridge between like Ethereum and the outer world per se, and that they can scale, or are we still at like the proof of concept, like very much like within the Ethereum community?
I think they have the potential, but I think one of the main things that we need to remember is all of these guys need to then go into to continue being able to build these things. So ETHTurin, again, taking them as an example, they started at ETH London. And it was one of those great projects that basically used App Hero, which is the non-code or low-code solution, to be able to get this this project off the ground. And then
this is great. We're having Denison tomorrow, actually, talk about App Hero.
Yes. So this is a great opportunity for people who have ideas to quickly set something up. But again, once you set it up, or you, let's say, set the foundations, you must have enough funding opportunities or enough opportunity to tap into certain fund giving situations that you continue building. Because let's face it, in a lot of hackathons, it's a weekend project that then gets dropped, right? Because people have day jobs, they have things to focus on to earn money, and so on. But these types of things, and again, it shows me very clearly as a parallel between the ability to get involved in something that makes sense very, very clearly and very simply, like we were doing these trash bounties. People understand that. They understand what it is, the fact that there's a reward attached to it, the fact that you have to do, it's very, very simple. Nobody is talking about decentralization. Nobody is talking about cryptography. Nobody is talking about hashes. Nobody is talking about any of that. It's a very simple model. You do something, I'll reward you. Yes, there is the small explanation of, okay, what is cryptocurrency? But at the end of the day, it is another type of money. And until we get to that point where everything is as simple as that, or certainly an easy in for people who can then go off and explore other things, of course. And that is a very, very important piece, because once you have a wallet, you can go and explore things. And it's also one of the reasons why I've always done things on this earn as you learn model, because once you do things and once you get these small rewards, you are already a crypto hodler, technically. Right? You have it. You know what it is. It's no longer a concept. It is in your wallet that you've just set up. And you have done something on a decentralized application. This carries a lot of weight. And again, it brings it from a conceptual place to a practical place. So the very short answer is yes, they have potential. But we need to enable all of these different paths for people, and we need to make them a lot clearer. And that's something that I try to work a lot on, is how can we enable those flows for anyone to have a certain path to come in and explore and then decide what they want to do. And I think that was me done. Let's see.
Can you tell us about oh, sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, that was it. This is like, you know, yeah, tell me.
No. I mean, I'm personally would be interested. I mean, and as you know, about hearing about the plans and like what you have in mind for the Pepo app, because yes, as you rightly said, like most of projects, like when they start on something and then they end up being, you know, at least for successful projects, they are flexible enough to be able to redirect the attention and change even completely from what they were supposed to be at the beginning. So somehow I feel like the Pepo app is a little bit like that. Like it's agile enough to adapt to the community, and I really like the organic way that you know, like these are also experimentation, so they have to be agile. So would love to hear more.
So with Pepo, it's a very interesting concept, and also it's very, very user friendly, and it's one of those applications that was very much built with the user in mind, with the end user in mind, which means the onboarding flow is super quick. There are no transaction fees because we're talking about layer 2, and then you have the offboarding. You can exchange that crypto into IRL value. And because we have to abide by Apple Store regulations right now, you can exchange them for gift vouchers, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Uber Eats, whether it's Airbnb, Netflix, whatever. There's a lot of opportunities, and I'd encourage everybody to check it out, because again, you're making that transition from something that is over here that you can't necessarily go to your local store and buy things with, but you can have a reward in real life. Now, it's very interesting from the perspective of users from different backgrounds, so different archetypes of users. One of the main things that we're seeing it evolve with right now, as we have the lockdown, a community got created with life in coronavirus or during coronavirus, where there's loads of people sharing their experiences, what they're doing, how they're coping, what's happening in their countries, and so on, and sharing it with the community. There's another one that we started, Makoto from Kickback, set up this event where you stake money and you have to do 20 push-ups every day for 30 days. The Dragon Quest Hackathon community.
Oh yeah, I saw it. And I did not register.
Is now a fitness kind of app. It's basically you're going into all of these different use cases, but at the end of the day, it's all about sharing things with the community, and it's all about how you are getting value out of it and
Simona,
how you're
you
sharing that.
accidentally muted your camera, by the way.
Oh yeah. So it's an interesting one, and also what I'm seeing is, for instance, because we just launched Pepo Live and a 90-second option for the videos. Now, one of the best things about that for the push-ups was that people were finding 30 seconds way too short to be able to do 20 push-ups, depending on what level of fitness we're in. So now they have 90 seconds. It's much more comfortable. But also, I'm seeing a lot of people condense messages about a bigger piece of content that they're sharing, and they're doing the TLDR. And then linking to a broader piece of content. Again, very, very interesting, because we're all like, our attention is pulled in 10,000 directions at all times. Maybe I do just want a TLDR, but maybe I want it in a visual way. Another thing that we're doing is we've started, and again, in partnership with the guys at Metacartel for Dragon Quest, we're doing these People Live education sessions for the hackers with all the different sponsors. And we're launching it straight in the Dragon Quest community. So people just head to the Dragon Quest community, they have a button and it says join live session, and voila. And so the use cases of sharing information and sharing knowledge and sharing experiences, that's what you're seeing. And at the end of the day, Ethereum is as much is equal parts technology and community. It's very, very important for us to make sure that we evolve this with humans in mind, where you go from a one-dimensional view of human beings that certainly these current economical models or Web 2 models have us in. You're only going to get rewarded for this particular skill set that you have, that you are employed for, and nothing else, because that's just the way it is. And opening it up and broadening it to the point where we are 360-degree individuals and could be getting value out of a lot of different things.
Well, that's happened more in the barter community, right? So I mean, you barter all of your additional human skills that you have by doing things for other people and people doing things for you. It's more a tokenization of the existing barter sort of culture, I would say.
Potentially, it's an evolution of it.
Yeah.
Because again, yes, you want it to be something that is, yes, it applies to your very, very close-knit community, but also the broader global playing field, right? You want to be able to take that value with you across all of these different spaces. And that's what.
Portability.
Yeah. And it's huge. It's very, very important.
Cool. Man, your slides rock. The content rocks. It is such a pleasure, man, every time to do something together with you, Simona. Thank you so much, man, for your
and
contribution.
thank you so much for having me. Again, I'll share the documentary link and so on in Discord. Feel free to ask me any questions. We definitely learned a lot. So I would, any kind of questions you have about the ins and outs of potentially doing something regarding SDGs or solving those, I'm there for answers if I can give them.